So the future? It's like this really crazy idea, right? There's no way to tell what's going to go down. Two Crude Dudes is one of those really brave games that tackles all the questions that you want to know. Like, what would happen if a scientist could build a weapon that totally flattens cities and then waits for the perfect time to take over with his mutant army? So seriously, I mean, put yourself in the same situation. Most people would totally be cowering in fear, or they'd be dead. But these dudes, they get called in by the government. They go into the street, beating the crap out of the mutants. And alone, they're basically the whole army at once. They pretty much restore social order by like totally wiping out the enemy. In the fight for the city, you get to see a lot of the sights, lots of streets, which is really cool, I feel right at home. The further you get into the city, the more mutated and deformed the baddies get. And you'll see that some of these bad dudes, they're like totally equipped with really futuristic and deadly weapons. And man, seeing this game, it could really scare some people. Especially, the weapons like frisbees, flamethrowers and snakes. We've got that kind of gear now, but they've, perfected them. Alright, so you may be built like a tank, but all you really have going for you is the ability to pick up pretty much anything you want, enemies, poles, cars, rocks, the other player if you're playing with a mate. And it's a pretty cool feature, killing with debris and flying bodies. And man, these tanks, they handle pretty tightly. You could call it a little bit stiff, but I call it robot precision. These guys are skilled mercenaries. If the government didn't think they were up to the job, they wouldn't have promised to pay them well. And that's a fact. So Data East, the dudes who made this game, they went one further. I mean, I've mentioned mutants, but who could have imagined like half human, half animals? Well, Data East did, and man, it raises some great points like, what if? You need to go up against bosses with like scythes for arms. It's like a nightmare praying mantis. And that's just the second level. There's a whole handful of these guys. And seriously, you can see it in them. They're overcome with some kind of animal rage. Their attack patterns are totally in line with whatever kind of monstrosity they are. Like the rhino beetle dude, he'll continue to charge you. And the spider guy, he'll drop down and try and catch you. And the armadillo, he'll try and roll you. But that throwing move from earlier, it still totally works. If you need to get out of the way fast, just because you're a tank doesn't mean you can't roll to safety, or even climb to higher areas. I mean, these guys are pretty nimble. I guess being such a massive and crude dude, you are a pretty big target. And that bare chest, even though there's heaps of advantages, like movement and non-restrictive breathing, means you'll really be holding out for those cola machines. I don't know whether it's just because the drink is really futuristic or if it's something to do with how damn refreshing it is. But I think they're totally onto something. Because you see this kind of trend repeated later in games like Fighting Force, and really, it's pretty crazy to think that after its documented benefits, Mum still won't let me have any after 6 PM. So the whole fight, it ends up taking you into this pretty high-tech lab kind of thing. So this crazy professor, he's really created something beautiful here, amongst all that chaos. He's obviously got a massive amount of resources and equipment together. Whatever this guy is doing, there's a lot of love to it. And when you go storm the lab and destroy those boss clones, I guess this game gives you that feeling that, who really is the villain? Well, actually when he transforms, he's obviously the villain. But I'm so glad the final boss wasn't a dweeb in a lab coat. And you actually get a pretty rad ending. Except this bit here, why would you blow that place up? I totally would have decked it out, installed a killer sound system. So, Two Crude Dudes, it's a pretty bleak look at what might happen in the future, but it is really rad to know that there is such a good backup plan in place.